Common Hour is about to begin. Please take your seats and silence your cell phones. Look, I'm doing what I said. Welcome to Common Hour. Can we get quiet, please? My name's Jim Strick. I'm the chair of the Common Hour Committee this year, also professor of Science, Technology, and Society. Next week's Common Hour will feature Lydia Bell, whose talk is entitled Optimizing Performance, Using Data to Maximize Student-Athlete Wellness. Hope we see a lot of student athletes here next week. I'd like to thank this week's pizza servers. Can we have a round of applause for Impact? Impact was established in 2004, serving as Franklin and Marshall's non-Greek brotherhood, grounded in 3 pillars: leadership, brotherhood, and community service. They strive to emphasize the importance of having a brotherhood, serve as a support system on campus, and in turn, push men to accomplish college together. They're both active on campus and the Lancaster community throughout the year, collaborating or creating programs that benefit the community as a whole. Impact meets every Tuesday from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. in Booth Ferris, actively engaging in various topics from social issues, leadership development, and more. That sounds like an invitation to me. What are you doing Tuesday at 7:30? There will be Q&A for the last part of the presentation today. Please plan to stay until the end of Q&A, and the Common Hour will end promptly at 12:30. Q&A is open to members of the F&M community. We'll take questions from current students, faculty, and staff. We give first priority to students. Please come forward and form a line at one of the 2 microphones in the front during Q&A, and please state your name, year, and college affiliation. Now I'd like to introduce Van Goss, Professor and Associate Chair of History and Program Chair of Africana Studies.
Thanks, Jim. It's an honor for me to be a small part of this truly deeply historic occasion for us at Franklin and Marshall, to finally recognize this central event in our history, the Black Student Uprising of 1969. I'm going to introduce our four speakers and get off the stage, which is good. Before I do that, however, I want to single out for recognition three key organizations on this campus. First, the Black Student Union, the inheritor of the Afro-American which took up the banner first raised by the Afro-American Society in 1967, I believe. And since 1975 has been leading the struggle for social and racial justice on this campus. The BSU meets from 6 to 7 every Monday at the Black Cultural Center. All are welcome. Next, I want to talk about the Afro-American Alumni Council. Not quite as far back as the BSU, but a central role in moving F&M institutionally towards what we would like it to be. And Tony Ross, the longtime Major Field Marshal, is here. And last but not least is the African Caribbean Association, another student voice. Yeah. And the ACA, representing a whole new breadth and depth and diversity on our campus, meets at Thursdays from 6 to 7, I believe, in the Black Cultural Center. No. Ben's Underground, thank you. So, to the introductions in alphabetical order. First, we have Dr. Benjamin Bowser. I just want to say, you may have heard the expression, this is what democracy looks like. This is what radicalism looks like. And I mean it. So, Ben Bowser is Professor Emeritus in the Department of Sociology and Social Services at California State University, East Bay. He graduated from F&M in 1969 and received his PhD from Cornell in 1976. He has held an extraordinary range of senior scholarly research and administrative positions, including teaching at Binghamton, Cornell, the University of Colorado, the Sorbonne in Paris, and since 1987 at CSU East Bay. He is the recipient of many, many honors, including a Fulbright Award in Senegal and the presidency of the Association of Black Sociologists, much more. Finally, on a personal note, his list of publications, books, and articles, and more is truly humbling to a fellow academic like myself. It's pages and pages of serious refereed publications covering a wide range of major scholarly topics. Just recently, he published in 2017, The Abandoned Mission in Public Higher Education, the Case of the California State University, and I believe a month ago his current project came out, an anthology edited with Chelly Devedut on racial inequality in New York City since 1965. So, give it up for Ben Bowser. Adrian C. Lamos II. Esquire. Adrian Lamos came to Franklin and Marshall from Boys High School in Brooklyn with 5 other classmates. Although an entering freshman, the Afro-American Society tapped him as group facilitator for the orientation discussion on Eldridge Cleaver's Soul on Ice. I wish I'd been there. Exposure to this student collective helped him develop several tools for survival at F&M. While in school, he was a dorm counselor, general manager of WF&M, and the Afro-American Society's Minister of Communication. After graduating in 1972, he became a teacher in Brooklyn and the first African-American graduate of New York University's Diploma in Real Estate program. This led him to a long and productive career in real estate, Then, in 1997, he relocated to Chandler, a suburb of Phoenix, joining American Airlines as a cargo manager. Once his interest in aviation management waned, he returned to Chandler and to high school and community college education. Today, he is involved in real estate development in Arizona and the nationally designated historic black resort in Sag Harbor, Long Island, called Azarest. So, give it up, Mr. Lamos. Next is my fellow historian, Todd Mealy. Todd is the author of This is the Rat Speaking, the definitive history of black power at F&M, which I teach in my African American history course. He's the author of 5 other books as well, and a contributing writer for Pennsylvania Heritage Magazine, where he focuses on race and law history, sports culture, and abolitionism. He is an educator of 18 years in 2 school districts in Lancaster County, J.P. McCaskey and Penn Manor High School, which I believe is in the house. Now, at Penn Manor, his course, his seminar on race, ethnicity, and gender, is the only such course taught in a public high school in this state. It has received national praise in the Washington Times, the Durham Herald News, and the Seattle Times. He also teaches at Dickinson. He has 2 books scheduled for 2020. This is a bit unfair, Todd. The first, tentatively titled Too Long Delayed, A Critical Race Studies Blueprint for Predominantly White High Schools, is an appeal for mandatory race-conscious education in America's public high schools. The second is co-authored with Holocaust survivor Linda Schwab and is titled Displaced, Surviving the Holocaust and the Road to a New Beginning. So, Dr. Todd Mealy. Our last presenter is Leroy Pernell. Mr. Pernell earned his degree in government from F&M in 1971 and his J.D. from the Ohio State University College of Law in 1974. He was a professor at the OSU College of Law from 1975 and vice provost of OSU's Office of Minority Affairs in 1994-1997. Then he spent 10 years as law dean at Northern Illinois University, and then as dean at the Florida A&M University College of Law from 2008 to 2015, leading it to acquiring full accreditation from the American Bar Association. His efforts to advance Florida A&M's law school's academic success and bar preparation program received national recognition as an, quote, outperformer by Pre-Law magazine and consistent ranking in the top 5 for law school diversity by U.S. News & World Report. Pernell has received F&M's Alumni Citation Award in June 2011, one of only 51 alums thus honored. He has authored numerous articles, book chapters, and other publications, and is currently under contract for a book titled Combating Racism in Criminal Justice to be published next year. So, Professor Pernell. And now I will hand over to our moderator, Todd Mealy.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to make a couple remarks before we start to give some contextual things, but I want to say also Dean Pernell is the person on the cover of the book, so also that could have been added to the bio. Anyone was wondering who that was. But I only have about 7 to 10 minutes or so to speak to you about what happened here in the spring of 1969, and then we're going to go through some questions that I will ask, and then we'll open up to the audience. So allow me to touch on F&M and then leave it for a little bit and circle back, and I'm going to try to do all that in under 10 minutes. But roughly at 8 o'clock in the morning on May the 22nd, 1969, about 36 students here at F&M had cordoned off the entrance to Old Main with chairs and desks in an attempt to prevent the administering of a final exam of a newly created course called Interdepartmental 4 the black experience in America. About an hour later, 7 of the course's 8 professors were then locked inside the adjacent building, Goethean Hall, for about 5 hours. As the students insisted on culturally responsiveness in their education experience here at F&M. And what they were insisting on included an increase to African-American faculty members. At the time, there were just 2. An increase in the number of African-American students that were attending F&M. At the time, there were just 60, with about 2,000 students on campus. They were also demanding the change to a curriculum that was culturally responsive. And for the 12 African-American students that were enrolled in the course, they insisted on giving those students an A. Now, what happened at F&M in the spring of '69 was not an isolated event. In fact, a black college student takeovers, occupations, sit-ins, strikes, uprisings, whatever you want to call them, occurred at more than 150 colleges and universities across the country between 1967 and 1969. You know, one of the first ones that actually occurred at Howard University, where between 800 and 1,000 students took over an administrative building for 5 days in March of 1968. And perhaps the longest-lasting occupation occurred at San Francisco State from November of 1968 to March of 1969. You know, as just about 100 students had occupied an administrative building and went on strike, you know, for the course of 134 days. And during that protest, more than 500 people were hurt and arrested. Not far down the road here, but at Swarthmore College, there was an 8-day takeover of the admissions office, which ended abruptly when the college president died of a heart attack in an untimely death. But perhaps the most well-known was what happened at Cornell University. Over the course of 36 hours on April 18th and April 19th of 1969, when about 100 students had occupied Willard Straight Hall for 36 hours. During the course of that occupation, a number of white students tried to break into the building to try to wrestle the black students out of the building. That was driven back. That was beaten back. The students were pushed back outside the windows. But you have to imagine yourself at Cornell being just 2% of the population of Cornell. You know, a total black population of 100 students on a campus that had 23,000 students. And the kind of environment that would be outside of Willard Straight Hall, the student activities building, as the crowds kind of enveloped the building and they grew larger. So in the course of that protest, then guns were brought to the building and provided to the students for self-defense, for self-protection. But the images of those students walking out of Willard Straight Hall carrying guns, having bandoliers across their chests, some of them holding pool sticks that had been carved into spears for self-defense, clearly frightened a lot of people. And there were several federal legislators, lawmakers, that proposed a piece of legislation called the Campus Disorder Bill following Cornell, which threatened to defund colleges that supported students in their protests and to criminalize student activists on campus. Now, that aside, what was happening between 1967 and 1969 was a way that language was being transmitted from one college to the next, from one student body to the next, all the way across the country, from Cornell to San Francisco State. And you have to consider that there are maybe 4 or 5 significant events that serve as the context for what was happening during those 3 years. You know, in one case, in June of 1966, you have Stokely Carmichael declare Black Power. And in what we would call today going viral, his phrase Black Power went viral across the country. As what he was doing is he was challenging this notion of assimilating to the dominant culture. And he was saying, try to resist the Du Boisian double consciousness and embrace racial pride. And that message then led to the creation of the Black Panther Party just a few months later in October of 1966, which quickly was able to embrace and push an Afrocentric, an Afrocentric new school of thought that had influences in communities and K through 12 schools and colleges all throughout the United States. In addition, you have to consider the violence that was being displayed by the government in Vietnam, and how African American students saw the violence in Vietnam as part of their lived experience in America, off campus. You have a wave of urban riots that occur between 1964 from Harlem to Watts outside of LA to Detroit in 1967 to the 100 cities following the death of Martin Luther King in 1968. But perhaps most importantly, what you have to consider is the absence or the loss of freedom pedagogy, of black studies with the court-ordered desegregation of schools following the Brown v. Board case. So what F&M students were doing in the spring of '69, they were asking for cultural responsiveness. They were asking for equitable spaces on campus. They were asking for equitable curriculum. They were asking for professors that looked like them. Now, Martin Luther King said in 1965, in the middle of the Watts riots, or also called the Los Angeles Uprising, in August of '65, he said to Mike Wallace, an anchor from CBS, a riot is the language of the unheard. Now, what students at F&M were doing in '69 were not rioting in the city, but they had for years asked for culturally responsiveness on campus, and no one heard them. And by 1969, that resulted in the black student takeover in May of that year. Now, with a few minutes that I have left, what I wanted to do for folks that don't know the story in its entirety, I want to give you a quick timeline, and I'm going to go to a series of questions. So in 1967, F&M, African-American students at F&M formed for the first time the Afro-American Society. By 1968, that happened in the spring of '67, by 1968, there was the request, I should say, for a Black Studies program. After the administration talked it out, they realized they could not form a program, so instead they offered a class. And that class was going to be offered to students in the spring of 1969. So the course that was created then by February, that started in February of 1969, is Interdepartmental for the Black Experience in America. It had 8 teachers, had 8 professors of it. They represented departments of history, government, psychology, economics, anthropology, sociology, English, and philosophy. 12 African-American students enrolled in a class of about 60 students total. By mid-semester, the black students in the course realized that they had become the text, the resources in the course. So in other words, the course had become a course where white students in the class were studying the black students in the class. And after telling the professors how they felt, in May, a final exam was announced, but it had not been posted, or in other words, announced on the syllabus at the beginning of the year. So this was an unannounced final exam. So the students came together, gathered together, and they decided that on the 21st, the day before the final exam, that they would approach the lead professor of the course. And they would ask them if they could be dismissed from the class. And they offered 3 demands. One was apology for how they were treated during the course of the semester. 2 was an A for all of the students that took the course, and 3, an exemption from the class as well. They did not get those demands, so the next morning, students arrived early. Before 8 o'clock, they had cordoned off, barricaded the front of Old Main to try to prevent the test from being given. When the professors arrived, 7 of the 8 professors arrived at about 8:45 in the morning before the test. They saw the building was blocked, so they improvised and turned the test into a take-home exam. And they told everyone, they hung a sign and told everyone to go into Goethean Hall, where students could pick up the test to then take home and resubmit 24 hours later. It was at that instant where the professors were then locked inside of the building, where the sit-in lasted for the next 4.5 hours or so. At about 11 a.m., a faculty member from the president's office, the assistant dean of students, James Gordon, showed up and tried to negotiate with the students, and by 1:15 in the afternoon, there was a compromise. So what came out of the compromise was, in that instance, 1 was an apology was given to the students. 2, there was the promise that no legal ramifications would be levied upon the students. 3 was that the students would be able to pick their own grades for the course. Everybody leaves. The students will meet, converse over the next couple of days. And on May 28th, the faculty goes back on what they had promised to the students, and instead what they did is they said they're not going to choose their own grades. Instead, we're going to give seniors a pass-no-pass option, or pass-no-pass grade, and the underclassmen that still were going to attend F&M the following year, they could have the option of either choosing the grade that they had at that moment before the final exam, or to take the final exam if they wanted to boost the grade and perform well on that. In the end, though, no Black Studies program was created for another 25 years, roughly. So in 1994, the conversation over creating the Africana Studies Department emerged on campus, and by 1997, they were offering degrees in Africana Studies. So I hope that serves as a good background about what happened in 1969 and allows us to get into a series of questions. So let me take a seat here, figure out how to use the microphone, and we'll go ahead. Check. Okay. So my wife and I, Dr. Bowser, Dean Pernell, and Mr. Lamos, my wife and I, we have something at home that have effectively called dessert first, meaning as we cook dinner, our kids see the snacks and they start eating the dessert before we eat the dinner. So what I want to do is I want to ask you a question I think all of us want to hear first, which is, can you take, all of you, all 3 of you, can you take a few seconds and can you tell us what you were doing during the 18, 20-hour period between what was happening May 21st in Dr. Odudeku's office when the initial demands were made, and then on May 22nd when the 5-hour occupation at Goethean Hall occurred? Okay, Dean Pernell.
Well, I'll start with that. Thank you for the question. Of course, my perspective on that is also impacted by the fact that I was not a student in that course. I believe that was the year that either I just came out of the presidency of the Afro-American Society, or may have been a transition there. And so during that period of time, I certainly was aware of the concerns that students have that were expressed through their actions. We certainly talked about this a great deal. We talked about it in terms of reactions of the college administration and the deep sense of anger, disappointment at how this program had developed, and of course this course, as it was the end product of a lot of other actions and activities, some of which you touched upon in the book, that were not successful. So the sense of frustration, I think, was palatable during this whole period of time. So a lot of it was time was spent watching what is going to be the next reaction here, and trying to convince folks that our concerns were serious concerns. Our concerns were not just a matter of grade. Our concern was a matter of being accorded some level of respect. So, much time.
Mr. Lamos, Dr. Bowser.
Well, Leroy, I didn't know you weren't in the course.
No, I was not, and the reasons why I wasn't in the course, I think were expressed. I think the book talks about a letter or editorial or something I wrote at the time. Was that it struck me from the very beginning that the central problem of the course was one of not a discussion and a working with African American students, but rather our being the subject, you titled your book "The Rat." I guess given the cover, I must be the rat. But sort of asking the rat to perform, I think there was a great deal of concern that I had. I did not want to be part of that. If we were looking at it in modern context, and those of you who do research know that if you have human subject research, there are protocols you have to go through and permissions. None of that happened then. Basically, we were lab experiments. And I had no idea, no desire to be a lab experiment. This was not the type of academic development that I had been talking about with faculty that we needed to have. And on a personal level, I did not want to be part of that.
Well, interestingly, I think we're kind of fraudulent because I wasn't in the course either. And I wasn't in the course, so I think we have to have Adrian speak. I wasn't in the course because the faculty who were offering the course weren't prepared and were not qualified to teach it. Okay? I had looked at the syllabus they proposed, and they included readings, which I had already done, and they had poo-pooed in other classes. So I was saying, well, now you're going to bring this together in some course and offer it? So, okay, that's the first thing. I wasn't in the course. And then to answer your question, what did I do? I was taking pictures. I personally didn't want to be part of the takeover, and not because I was chicken or another, but because I had no faith in the college at that time to do the course well, and I was amazed at the spirit of my fellow students who felt so strongly that they wanted to demonstrate to the college. I said, well, what do you want to demonstrate to these people for? I mean, I just couldn't understand that. So I wasn't part of the course, and I knew that Keith Spoiling was going to be looking for me, and I knew him well enough to know that was going to be the case. So, and also I had been voted out of presidency of the African American Society the night before.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, the brothers felt I was too conservative. I wasn't on with the program. So there's diversity among us, and so I wasn't. So I was out. I was out of office. So that was the end of it. But in terms of what Leroy is talking about being an experiment, I felt that we had been an experiment from the beginning, the moment we had stepped onto campus. They were trying to figure out what were these rats, can they perform, can they think, can they write, and so forth. And Adrian and I can tell you that we had elite educations in New York. We came out of some of the best high schools in New York City and came here, and for the first time were treated like ends. I mean, I can now look back on I have all my papers from then. I have comments from the faculty on them, and I read them now and I say, oh my God. I had comments like, well, I didn't know you could do that. Is this real? Did you write that paper? No. Stuff like that. And of course, Professor Tyndall in math, I came in wanting to be a math major, and Professor Tyndall told me the first day in class, you're not going to complete, you're not going to graduate, you're not going to you're going to fail this course, That's what he told me first day. So I did all my answers correctly in exams and still failed the course because I didn't have elegant answers. So, that's the kind of environment we came into on the academic side. So I don't want to take up all the time, but, we have to talk about something I don't think was in the book. It's called the black tax. The black tax is if you're black at F&M and you write an A paper, you get a B. If you write a B paper, you get a C. And if you do anything like a C, oh, God help you, you're toast. You're on probation. So, by the way, that helped me through graduate school and everything else because when I left here, I never, ever had anything. I was crazy. I was a crazed monster. nothing was incorrect. The dots were dotted, the T's were crossed, and everything, and I was in class on time. I didn't give a professor any reason to do anything that would say that he is not this. And that's crazy. Well, anyway, so that's what the environment was leading up to the course when some of the younger students who felt that they were disrespected and didn't understand that they were experiments. And I must say now, virtually all of those people have not been back. They graduated. They haven't been back. They can't get back. They won't come back. And if I said when I left here, Jesus, Allah, Muhammad, Lord Krishna, please don't let me ever come back to this place again when I graduated. So it's quite a miracle that I'm back and these three people are back. I guess the moral of that story is don't ever say never.
So, Adrian, do you want to provide some insight here, too?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this much. The thing that I remember about that situation, I'm going to make it a clear sweep here. I was not in the class. I was not allowed to be in the class. I was not allowed to be in the class because, as you remember, as a freshman, they give you a whole group of distributive requirements of courses you have to take, and promise me they were not going to put that as a mandatory course. Instead, what I got was the result of the philosophy teacher. I was in his class because you had to take philosophy. And what I got from that situation was, Mr. Lamos, I am unable to grade you in this class. The reason is because I saw you standing outside of the building, which means that you believe that white people cannot grade black people. As a result, I will not give you a grade in this course. If you wish to have a grade in this course, you must talk to the dean. Well, basically I said, yeah. And so I was not in the class, but I felt the entire time that I was on campus for that freshman year, it was truly a rat situation. I found my own ways because of my own background that I became the king rat, where I used it to my advantage. My freshman year, I had a single room.
King rat.
King rat. My sophomore year, I had my roommates pay four parts of the rent for a 4-bedroom apartment. As I should. The point I'm making is that what freshman year taught me was don't believe anything somebody says. I'm in real estate. And in real estate, we say, how do you know a real estate agent is lying? Their mouths are moving. Because if you don't put it in writing, it's not going to happen. Well, Franklin and Marshall taught me a lesson. They put it in writing, and they still lied to me. And that is the thing that I learned here my freshman year. And that bore me well for the time that I stayed here. As Ben was saying, the same way that he was voted out of the society, I was voted to be turned in as the poster boy for discipline in 1971. We had another student takeover. And I was at the time the Minister of Information. So I was the person that had to read everything. I was the one that had to produce everything. And so the dean decided that after we had taken over another building, that they were going to put the entire African American society on disciplinary probation for the rest of the year. And they refused to prosecute me in writing. That night, the same way that Ben got voted out, we had an Afro meeting. And what do you think came up in the Afro meeting? The dean suggested that somebody from this place should take a fall for the society. And if they take a fall for the society, everybody's scholarship and everything is fine. So in my typical way, I said, I walked over to the registrar. I said, how many credits do you need to graduate? They said 120. I said, how many do I have? They said 120. I said, I'll see you in May. So, if there's one thing, thanks.
This is better? Okay.
Yeah.
If there's one thing I learned, it's don't just take a person for what they write down. Take a person for their actions. And one of the reasons that I have not been back to this campus since 1972, this is the first time I've been on this campus. I didn't know where the hell I was. Is that you have to watch what a person does. And if they're true about what they mean, they're going to show you with their actions. Is that Roberta? Oh my God. When I used to recruit for this school, I never told anybody to come here. I would only tell black people, you have got to go to college. I don't care where you go, but you've got to go to college. I met this, no, I wouldn't say that because I wanted you to go to college. And I don't want to knock a place because everything is going to have their own impression. And I met this young woman when she was in Brooklyn. She was graduating from high school. And I talked up, and I'm a young guy, so, I'm looking at good-looking women. But she didn't come to Franklin or Marshall. She went to Colby, super cold. But 1 year later, who do I see strolling across the campus? This young woman. She ended up being one of our greatest alums. Her name is Roberta Kirby Nunes, and she came to this school, and when she saw me on campus, she said, you see, I listened to you. And that made me feel that, I'm on a campus that has its problems, but the point was another black person went to college. And that is what I really learned when I was here. Folks, education is phenomenal. It can take you wherever you want to go. And a lot of people just never get a chance. So what I dedicated myself to doing when I was here, and it sort of became part of my life, is I know I'm going to make it. My ego is such. I know I'm going to make it. What's important is that the next person makes it. And that's how I've dedicated my life. That's even why I'm still teaching today.
So let me interrupt you here.
That's it.
I want to ask at least two more questions before we open them up. So, and I'm going to move down the list here. So, but Dr. Bowser, this is directed to Dr. Bowser. Obviously, any of you can jump in. But you've written on the topic of conflict and diversity. And as we reflect on how students in the 60s insisted on cultural relevance, the improvement of the number of faculty of color, and how involved and influential the community was in black campus life, what are the lessons learned from the incident in May 1969 that speaks to the various factors of equity in both K through 12 and higher education today? And could you provide any steps forward?
Yeah, the first lesson is that there's no separation between the community and the college. That's the first lesson. As Todd wrote very eloquently in the book, it was not simply about F&M and students at F&M and taking over F&M. We were part of the community, and they were hurting, and they were rioting, and had much more, and they suffered a lot more consequences than we did. So part of what was in our head was that this is bigger than simply Franklin and Marshall and students here. The other thing is that when people care enough to put everything on the line, that is something that you come out of it a new person when you do that. Because up until then, you're just simply, you're going along to go along. I need this. This is going to pad my pocket with a job and with money and so forth. But when you put yourself on the line for principles, then you know that there's something more going on than simply that. And ultimately, you stand a test of time. So that's another thing that came out of it. I could think of more, but I don't want to take up any more time.
Okay, let me direct a question. Do you want to touch on that one? Or I have a question directly for you.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Okay, let me ask the question, and you can take it in any direction you want to. So your colleague here, Dr. Bowser, wrote in the book's forward about the existence of an oppressive and alienated experience on campus. Can you reflect upon how black students at PWIs or predominantly white institutions are still as isolated, or in Dr. Bowser's word, ghettoized on campus as they are in society at large?
Yeah, well, let me just tell you a direct experience. We have as you know, I was dean at Florida A&M Law School in Orlando, and I had a student come into my office just 2 weeks ago, who is a graduate of F&M, and he heard about that I was that I went here, and I showed him the book, which shocked him. And the first thing he said to me, the first question he had for me, he said, and this is someone who just got out of here last year, right? First thing he said to me is, how did you deal with the isolation? So this is not something that's gone away. The sense of not being included, not being respected, and I keep coming back to that word. I think of all the different ways of formulating ideology, probably Aretha Franklin had it best, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. And it's a matter of not being intellectually respected, feared, and admired for what you bring to this campus. And when those things are missing, then again, you're just an isolated rat. And I want to follow up on something Ben was saying, which was very important at the time, but figures in on this, on the sense of isolation. One of the ways in which we as students then overcame that, as well as serving other goals that we had, was to become involved throughout the community, to understand that our presence on this campus was just an extension of the black community. And so when you ask, well, what were we doing during the time? I was more concerned with the garbage strike over in the black community and the fact that kids were being thrown out of the McCaskey High School. Those things were of as much relevance, if not greater relevance, than any pseudo course that somebody put together. And I think that when you look at the times in the 60s and 70s, and the things that were going on, you mentioned not just in terms of race, but in terms of the war and other activities, we had work to do. And we couldn't let that work be stopped by Franklin Marshall College.
Okay, well, thank you. Dr. Goss, maybe you want to have some people approach the microphones. As they do that, let me ask one more question to Adrian. In 1935, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote an article that was titled, "Does the Negro Need Separate Schools?" And so what he was doing in that article is he kind of predicted what would happen with the desegregation of schools in the future when African-American students were going to enroll in now predominantly white schools. So can you share your experience here at Franklin and Marshall, but answer the question, how did perhaps the failed promises of the Brown decision lead to the culture of campus uprisings during the final 2 or 3 years of the 60s? And try to be succinct, just because we have a bunch of people in line already.
Main problem with the Brown decision.
We can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay.
Yes.
The main problem with the Brown decision was that it was in '54. And by the time that we're rolling around in '68, there was, there still is, a giant river of black enterprise and intellectual capabilities that have always been flowing through our community. Prior to Brown, we have the HBCUs. And the HBCUs have always been a breeding ground for us. What happened with Brown was that some of that stream got misdirected or redirected to white campuses. But the problem was, when it came to the white campuses, people were lost. They did not have the support. The schools in general did not offer us any supportive services. The only supportive services that he offered us were social things. I can remember Dr. Bowser over here. Man, it's a hell of a van driver. Why? Because they would give us a van if we were going to leave campus. And we did that. But we did it the other way around. We also did it to import people to the campus. That they didn't like. So
by the way, it would stick shift, and I didn't know how to drive stick shift.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't.
Yeah. So the point I'm making, though, is that Brown was a good concept. Later on, when we're having our private meeting, I'm going to tell you another aspect of Brown that I know about. But Brown was an excellent decision in the sense that it put everybody on notice there are two societies here. This is before the riots. There are two societies. And Franklin and Marshall was, at the time, quite evidently an example of one type of a society. What happened was that when we came on the campus, we started tilting it a little bit more. And then since we left, it did undergo a major change. I think part of the problem, though, is that more changes still have to come. This fight is not over. This journey is not over. So we've got to take Brown. I'm glad, really glad. But you all know this. Attitudes are harder to change than laws. I can change a law any way I want, but if you've got the wrong attitude, you don't care about the law. You'll take the consequences.
Okay, thank you. So we have 4 people already. So why don't we go here, and then the 2 of you, but more people are welcome to come up.
Thank you so much for coming. My name is Mariama Berry, and I'm the co-president of the Black Student here. And I'm also a government and international studies major here, and I believe I am one of 2 Black students in the government department right now. I think the only one. So as you know, we have a reception after this that some student leaders were invited to, and I asked my advisor to excuse me from another class to email the professor. And the professor's response was, quote, "I have never for any reason asked that any member of this campus miss a class for any program I hosted or any speakers I brought in. I have had other professors ask students to miss my class for field trips, among other events, and I have reacted to that. I actually think my class times are important. If you think taking a student out of my class is beneficial to the student, then she is excused. I am surprised that the leaders who couldn't find any other time to meet with her aren't similarly flexible or don't similarly value my class time." So that was the response I got last night from this teacher in the government department. So followed by that, I'm gonna have my co-president ask you guys a question.
Government department has not changed.
Again, just to echo what Mariama said, I just want to say thank you all for coming to campus and sharing your ideas and your voices with us today. My name is Cody Henry. I'm co-president of the Black Student Union along with Mariama. I'm a joint public health, government, and medicine and society major, and the question that we have for you all today is, how can we divide the responsibilities amongst students, administrators, and faculty members to encourage students to continue to foster learning outcomes outside of the classroom? And I think this is just a very important question to ask in this moment where we see that learning doesn't always occur within the classroom, and that the opportunities for growth and experience for members who are being challenged, not just inside the classroom, but outside the classroom as well. Where does the space exist for those individuals to learn and grow? So, yeah.
Did you want to direct that to anyone in particular, or?
No,
okay.
Open forum.
Let me respond to that. One of the things that happened when we got here is that the college was responding to Brown versus Board of Education and to federal funding, which they were after for the Science Center.
Thank you for the Science Center.
Thank us for the Science Center. We built it. What it was not prepared was for us socially. See, there were 2 Franklin and Marshalls, and there may still be. There's the academic Franklin and Marshall, and then there's the outside of class Franklin and Marshall, which were the fraternities. Okay? So if you wanted a social life here, if you had to be a part of the fraternities. But the fraternities didn't get the memo. Okay? So they were places, and I had never been called nigger so many times in my life. Sometimes walking by a frat house, "Hey, nigger!" Okay, so that was the other side of Franklin and Marshall. And so we had to, because there was nothing other than classes, not like now, we had to do it all ourselves. That's how I went to the Dean Lacey. I almost lived with Dean Lacey. OW got him to a point where I want a van. We got to get the hell out of here. And that's what we did. And so being involved in community saved us. That's what made it happen for us. I think that's the answer to your question. So I don't know. One of the things that changed here is that at least now I think they're making an attempt. I see all these wonderful people around here, student services, and the other thing we wanted this place co-ed. Hey, before '69, this place was like a Marine barracks. All the testosterone was crazy. Okay, still is. Okay, so it was uncivilized. It was really uncivilized. So you go to class, and then you go outside of class, and then you'd have fights. I mean, that's what you did. You either got out of town, or you throw your hands up and dare somebody to come at you, and sometimes they didn't. Most of the time, they were too drunk to do much of anything. So to this day, I hate fraternities. So I don't know what they. Yeah. I mean, so and the Afro-American Society is not a fraternity. It's not a fraternity. We were very clear about that. I'm sorry, I went on too long.
No, you're fine.
Okay, thank you. Let's go right over here.
Hi, my name is Rashid Adeole. I am a joint major of government and public policy. I'm just a student. So as you may already know, the title of our prestigious campaign is Now to Next. So now that we've begun to make progress in increasing the talent, the students that we recruit, and diversify the pool of talent here, how would you make the case today for the decision makers in the room why it is necessary for them to hire qualified candidates who don't necessarily look like them?
Because I mean, I can take that too. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, go ahead. Now I'll comment.
Well, first of all, it's simply not a matter of getting black faculty. Not all black faculty are black. Not all white faculty are white. I know you weren't expecting that, but that's the case, okay? So the logic we make now is that this nation, for the first time since the early 1820s, our demography is as such that if you can't deal with people of color, you're going to be out of business in another 50 years. So this college and every other institution in this country is going to have to step up to the fact that this is a multicultural society. Always has been. The Roy Rogers and the white people has never been the real and the only America. My family has been in this country since 1650. I've been black from people who've been here since 1650. So, and a whole bunch of other black people walking around here predate virtually most of the white people here, okay? So this has always been a diverse country, and diversity is going to be our saving grace, and whether you like it or not, so you're going to have black Republicans, black Democrats, black liberals, black crazy people, black sane people, black F&M people, okay? So that's the reality.
Yeah, let me just comment on a couple of those points. First, on the faculty side, I want to pick up on something Ben was just talking about. The color of your skin does not necessarily determine the color of your mind. When I first came here, and I guess I can say this, even though he's passed on, without engaging in defamatory comments, but there was a faculty member here, a black faculty member, who I was assigned to as the mentee. Wonder why? But I go in to meet with him, and he says, "Look, I don't know if I can relate to you because I teach Russian history, and all I can relate to is Russia." And I said, "I'm from Brooklyn. That's not Russia." And so, we just never. I appreciate he went his way, and I went my way. second little vignette, prior to this course in question being formulated back in probably 68, I approached one of the professors in the English department. Won't get into names. But I said, I was very concerned that this curriculum did not express or include black literature and black literary contributions of any type. And he said, I think that's terrible. I tell you what, I'm going to put a course together, and the first thing we're going to read is Uncle Tom's Cabin. And so I said, I think this conversation's done. Obviously, we are not communicating on the same page here. I think that the concept of faculty who are attuned to the contributions, who can relate to a broad community is critical to the learning process. But I want to add just one other factor here. And I have this conversation very often when people talk about diversity and why it's important and why we take forward. I said, that's fine. Diversity has its proper place and its importance for all the reasons that were mentioned. But the real reason that we want black folks on this campus is that we were owed. We were owed since slavery. We were owed the opportunity to progress and achieve, not because diversity made sense, which it did, but because that's what justice would be all about. Some of you may, if you have a chance to do some research on what colleges benefited from slavery, colleges who benefited from slavery. Their investments, their portfolios included profits from slavery. Do you want to guess what college is among that list? Do I have to say it?
F&M.
Good old F&M.
Who wants a new research paper topic? It is my unenviable task to say that it is 12:30 and ask you to thank our speakers again.
Thank you.